You know, imagine an organization who sets out simply to help returning citizens find employment, and they start in the basement of a church. And then they get a building from the Chicago Public Housing Authority that looks like a public housing authority building. And we're in that building manufacturing honey and doing a resource center and all sorts of things. And then we discover that there is some redevelopment going on the west side. And we're able to get into the Sears Tower. And for the first time, you're starting to see community folks and board members and staff hold their head a little high and be proud that, wow, we've come from a church to this small, ratty building to today we can then dream of creating a premier manufacturing facility and meeting space on the west side of Chicago. That's been the arc of this institution.
When I joined Sinai, it was during a time when the very issues that are still plaguing our community was forefront. But it was also about that article in the Chicago Tribune about the millstone that was on the front page that really was like a dagger in our hearts. Because, you know, are you talking about my community? Are you saying that we're not good enough? We're never going to be good enough? And that did something to our community. And it was the blessing of having the Staines Family Foundation saying, we need to have those uncomfortable conversations to address whatever it is that can counter that article.
Back in 1998, our family started doing philanthropy work together with an I Have a Dream program, where we worked with a group of 6th graders, saying that we would help make sure that that group of kids made it through high school, into college or work or whatever it is they wanted to do. And when you work with a group of folks, you sort of learn that you can't just deal with their schooling, you're dealing with whatever's going on in those family and those family systems to make sure that they can succeed. And we decided, based on our experience with the I Have a Dream program, that we really wanted to be in the community. And through a process, we ended up focusing on North Lawndale.
There was a fear of gentrification in our community. And so the charge and the question was to be able to say, what do we need to do so that individuals who live and were born in North Lawndale can continue to live, but more than just live, thrive. And clearly workforce was a big issue. My organization, Sinai Community Institute, was established to incubate community initiatives. And we had a plan that had been approved by the community to create and establish the North Lawndale Employment Network. As we were looking for an executive director to lead North Lawndale Employment Network, of course, we looked inside of our community, but also we said, let's go wider. Let's see, because we want the best. We cannot afford to fail.
My first memory of learning about the North Lawndale community, learning about the Staines Family Foundation, was by an invitation to come and speak to this group about some of the work I was doing while as a program officer in Denver, Colorado.
The late Commissioner Robert Steele was in Denver, and he knew that we were looking for an executive director, and by happenstance, he saw Brenda speak, and she was impressive. And so he said, we need to interview her.
I received a phone call asking if I would be interested to be considered for the executive director position. And the more I spoke with them, the more I became really intrigued and thought that perhaps I could make a difference. Several months later, we're relocating, my family and I, to move to Chicago to become the first executive director. North Lawndale was intended to honestly be a network, but what changed was this theme began to emerge around people experiencing family members who have been incarcerated. It wasn't comfortable for people to say, I have a son who's incarcerated. People would instead say, I have a son who's coming back and he needs a job. And I thought, wow, I'm hearing this so much that we need to figure out what is the impact of incarceration in this community. commissioned a study and learned that nearly 57% of the adults in North Lawndale had had some involvement in the criminal justice system.
The late 90s were a big boom time for employment. With a little bit of technical training, you could get a very good job, the equivalent of $18 an hour plus benefits, and also jobs that enable you to learn on the job and move up. If you had the resources to build those connections with employers, you could do that. But North Lawndale didn't have entities that could build those connections. The other historical policy thing was in the early 90s, in a bipartisan way with a Democratic president, we passed in this country, even though the crime rates, which had been high in the 80s, were starting to decline, a policy which was basically lock them up and throw away the key. So you had Lawndale in the biggest employment boom since the 60s without these connections, and with this double whammy of many of the citizens, community members incarcerated and coming back. It took a lot more than building education and training programs.
It's not that people don't want to work. That's not it at all. It's that people had significant barriers to employment because of having a criminal background. They paid their debt to society, and yet they still couldn't get a foothold. And that's when I decided that we needed to redirect our efforts, and we needed to create pathways forward for individuals who had served their time and who wanted to work. And so we established what we know today as the U-Turn Permitted Job Readiness Program.
I was incarcerated 2005. Upon my release in 2008, I kept seeing flyers around the neighborhood. U-Turn Permitted Program, U-Turn Permitted Program, U-Turn Permitted Program. Once I got started, I completed the 4-week program. They helped me get prepared for other things. They continued to help me brush up on my interview skills, tighten up my resume. Any resources they had available, they made sure that they were available to me and that I knew about it.
As a workforce organization, we have a commitment to not only help prepare people for jobs through training and skill certifications, but we have a responsibility to help place them in jobs. Although we were producing amazing, job-ready individuals, the will from employers wasn't there to hire them. So the question became, where are we going to find employers? And the answer was that we had to become our own employer. The answer was us. Well, a member of my board said, "Have you ever considered working with honeybees?" And I thought, what? Honeybees? And I learned that beekeeping is passed on primarily through mentorship. And I thought, that might work. So we decided that we would lean in, learned everything there was about beekeeping. We convinced the Illinois Department of Corrections to give us seed funding. We developed a business plan, and then we bought bees.
This is the creativity of Brenda. First of all, I mean, how many folks in the inner city do you know even want to or even manage bee apiaries? So you have that hurdle to get over. First of all, this is not something that is culturally a norm, but then to come up with something that is so seductively attractive at the same time. That was Brenda's magic. That not only was she going to find an alternative way to employ these folks, she was actually creating something that would ultimately attract people to the brand.
It took off. You know, we started to create honey right here in North Lawndale, and we would take it to local farmers markets. And it was creating work for people who needed and wanted to work.
My involvement began with the Boeing company deciding to relocate its headquarters to Chicago. There was an employee volunteer committee that was brought together to actually develop a business plan for the now burgeoning, Sweet Beginnings initiative. Victoria Reed, who was our principal lead under that, engaged everybody in our headquarters building, which included Aetna and PepsiCo and some other participants that were actually the foundation that helped uplift, Sweet Beginnings.
There was maybe about 4 examples in the country of not-for-profits that ran for-profit subsidiary businesses. So the goal was to make it legally possible, not just for us, but for anyone else who wanted to try this kind of an enterprise. There would be a, if you will, ground rules where someone could follow that principle. It gave us the footing really to proceed into all the distribution that we have since accomplished and the success that we're talking about right now.
So I had the pleasure of working for Mayor Daley for over 20 years. He met Brenda. When I became airport commissioner, we had this opportunity because there's all kinds of land that surrounds an airport that cannot be developed. They're called runway protection areas. But what they are is basically great grassy prairie areas. So I spoke to Brenda and I said, Brenda, what do you think if we put a couple hives at the airport? And Brenda went from a couple to like, can we do 100? Immediately we went from 0 to 100. And so the initiative started. This is about bringing people to the airport to work here that otherwise couldn't. Because when 9/11 happened, the rules of engagement at an airport changed dramatically. It didn't give people the opportunity to have a second chance there because of the requirements for safety and security that were in place. But we found a way to bring the North Lawndale Employment Network to the airport and created the first apiary at an airport in the entire country. And that's the partnership. So we were able to bring together people, planet, and profit, right? So the people from the North Lawndale Employment Network, we were able to serve them. We were able to serve the environment and protect the bees. And we were able to then bring it all home when we were able to take the products that Brenda was creating as she expanded the Sweet Beginnings line to go from not just honey, but to the Bee Love lip balms and lotions and soaps and candles, and then being able to offer those in the airport as gifts that people can actually purchase and take a piece of Chicago, a piece of North Lawndale home with them.
We started off with one flagship program, which is our U-Turn Permitted Job Readiness Program, and helping men and women who are re-entering society after incarceration. And in working and listening with that population, it became clear that there were other wraparound support services that were needed in order for them to be financially independent, to be able to advance economically. And so we introduced financial education services and coaching, because when you're making an entry-level wage, it's really important to figure out how to make that minimum wage dollar stretch.
Brenda, coming from Denver, had some familiarity with a model that the Annie Casey Foundation had developed at the time called the Centers for Working Families, which was a comprehensive approach to working with people around financial stability. Really was a coaching model, really assumes that an individual knows what they need, can set their own goals, and just needs the supports around them to realize that vision. And Brenda helped bring that model here to Chicago. I'm going to jump ahead 20 years. We have 10 active, what we now call financial opportunity centers here in Chicago, and LISC scaled that program up. Started in North Lawndale to close to 200 sites across the country.
As we began to grow, it was important that we continue to diversify the type of employment opportunities that we were making available, and that required exciting and different new partnerships. So one of the partnerships is a program we developed called Moving Forward, and that was established in partnership with CTA, Chicago Transit Authority. We had UPS at the table, and we also had Pace Transportation. And they helped us understand that there would eventually become a skills shortage in transportation because so many people were retiring out. And if we could help them identify new talent, people that would develop skills in transportation, distribution, and logistics, these would be jobs that would be more friendly for individuals who would actually serve time as well. We also established a great partnership with healthcare, working with Advocate Trinity Hospital, where we were able to open doors for great jobs in healthcare, in the hospital system. And these jobs had benefits and opportunities for advancement. Not only is our program work important, but we've sort of pioneered policies to help major industries reconsider working with people who in fact have served their time. We currently work with JP Chase. They have created policy for people to work who, again, have backgrounds in banking.
That number that I was given is supposed to follow you around for the rest of your life. Everything that I was told that I could not do, I've done it. I've worked for Chicago Transit Authority. I've worked for the United States Postal Service. I even have a real estate license, which are things that I was told that I never could have as a ex-convict. But look, God said yes, and I said yes, and so here I am before you, entrepreneur, doing the things that I want to do, and I'm not hindered by my incarceration.
Around 2015, it was clear that we had to move from our small little home on Independence and Flournoy to be able to accommodate the growing needs that we were experiencing. And so that new place was Nichols Tower.
We wanted to be in the community, to be someplace where we were contributing to advancement in the community. And so there's a community center there are schools there's new housing there, and it was, there were synergies to being in what was the Sears Tower and being a job training and transitional program.
I think the symbolism of the Nichols Towers, which is the original Sears Towers, it was a light post. And I think it still serves as a light post, you know, for what was and what can become for the North Lawndale community.
After a strategic planning session with the board of directors, we decided that we would launch a campaign to raise money so that we could have the ability to serve more. And then the board says, well, how much do you think you need to raise? And I said, well, 5 million? And they're like, no, we think you should raise 10. And I'm like, $10 million?
I was so proud of Brenda for just being bold and audacious. We don't always get to dream a bigger dream when we are in the midst of working in vulnerable communities with people who have life challenges that often bring us to our knees in prayer. I knew that a gift from the Staines Family Foundation early on would serve as a catalyst. And so I was very proud that it was one of the very last things that Harrison Staines did before his death in 2019. The gift that we gave to Brenda was one of our largest gifts at the time.
The Staines Family Foundation was the very first to commit to a leadership level contribution of over $1 million. It was $1.5 million. And then we went to our friends with JP Chase, and they also agreed to do $1 million. Then we went on to some other dear friends, Jim and Kay Mabey, and they're the Mabey Foundation. They gave $1 million, and it just it continued to flourish with friends coming through. The good news is that we actually raised more than $10 million, and we were able to acquire this beautiful campus that we're in today.
We always kind of had the dream when we started our foundation by figuring out a place-based strategy was right for us, that you could end up being able to bring in a lot more resources to that community because you get to know it really well. So to see a lot of partners come in, whether it's Wintrust by putting the bank here, whether it's Jim and Kay Mabey with their financial support, whether it's JP Morgan Chase coming in and making such a huge commitment for so long to expand the programs is incredibly rewarding.
When this building was created, we wanted to make sure that when people walked into this building, they felt worthy. Like, this is ours. They felt ownership, and that they felt excellence. Excellence in service, excellence in building, excellence in everything, customer service. And so this building actually communicates that.
The message is how you can reimagine a community, how you can reinvest in a community, and how our community deserves the best. The infrastructure, the design, everything was done with class because, you know, we've raised the bar, right? So that anyone else who comes to have a presence in North Lawndale knows you got to come correct.
My reaction to the campus when I visited was it signaled the dignity that the organization wanted to communicate from the outside plaza and the planting and the materials to the presence of a cafe and to the window looking into the production and the Peace Memorial Garden. I felt like, you know, you step into the doors and you stand upright.
I love that we're in a position to hire local entrepreneurs of color and have their products and services featured in our cafe, all against the backdrop of being able to help people secure the skills they need, the certifications they need to be competitive in our labor market.
When folks invest in North Lawndale Employment Network, who is focused on community wealth building, we're doing everything that we can. So when our cafe is open and folks are working in our cafe, those are residents from the community. The dollars that you're giving is helping this community become vibrant as it once was.
The key to continued growth of this organization are a few things: leadership, faith, obviously resiliency, innovative thinking, and a passion for the work.
In order for NLN to stay relevant, we must continue to change. And so we are challenged to make sure that we have the right data, we're asking the right questions, and that we're pivoting fast enough to accommodate the changes that are happening all the time.
I would say we're in early stages of maturity, but very early stages of it. I mean, so the sky's the limit. You know, Brenda is not even at the apex of her impact yet, or her leadership. It's just scratching the surface. So to have a leader who has served as long as Brenda, but is still on the top of her game, if you will, that's a gift to have. And you have a board and a staff that's in a similar place. It portends well for our future.
I think reflecting on the past is extremely important for your journey for the future because, you know, it was very scrappy at the beginning, right? Everybody worked really hard. There wasn't essentially a playbook. Everything was new frontier. And so they had to develop it. And every day they continue to build on that knowledge and build upon the organization.
NLN today has definitely blown away all expectations I had 13 years ago when I joined the board, hands down. I had no idea that this is where we were going to end up. I'm thrilled and excited that it is, but it definitely informs my belief that this organization can have a huge impact and can continue to grow, expand on a city-wide basis, a statewide basis, a national basis in terms of thought leadership. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but you know, I think there's a lot that we can accomplish.
They have a pretty bold goal to reduce unemployment by 10% That's going to require, more staff. That's going to require amplifying the strategies that they know work. I think for, supporters too, it also takes multi-year grants. We have a history of supporting organizations over the long haul. It just eases the mind of leaders to know that they don't have to worry about chasing the dollar all the time.
What I have seen happen with North Lawndale Employment Network is when there's an infusion of cash, especially unrestricted support, there is a steep growth in the organization. And since we need this organization and others like it, figuring how to use the experience of North Lawndale Employment Network to spread the word in a way that is compelling and persuasive to funders. Because money used well makes a real difference.
We want big, population level, transformative change. And that doesn't happen if you don't think big enough and plan big enough. The dreams that we have are big and audacious, and they're right, but they will take time. And in time, we'll know that we've actually made a real difference. Not that we're doing it to have legacy, but we're doing it because we do care about the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that.